My son did not die quietly. He died because a hospital ignored warning signs, dismissed my concerns, and treated his life like paperwork. I spent 7 years fighting in court to prove that his death was not an accident. It was malpractice. When I finally won the $92 million settlement in his name, I thought that chapter of pain had closed. But the very next morning, my ex-husband's new wife, who had not seen my son in over 20 years, walked into my living room in a designer suit and said, as his stepmother, I am now legally entitled to the money he left behind. She believed I would break. She believed I would surrender. She had no idea that my son left behind a truth more powerful than any claim she could make. My name is Marina Hale, and everything I am today was shaped by love, loss, and a promise I made to my son on the last night of his life. He looked at me through tears of fear and said, Mom, if anything happens to me, don't let them bury my story. Make them answer for what they did. I gave him my word. That promise became my purpose. Even though the lawsuit settlement was enormous, it was never about the money. It was about justice, accountability, and protecting other families from knowing this pain. My son, Aiden, was 29 when he died. He was kind, brilliant, full of ideas, and he believed in healing people through medical innovation. He was the kind of man who made the world better simply by being in it. I raised him alone after his father walked out when Aiden was 9 years old. There was no involvement, no calls, no support. Aiden grew up without a father, but never without love. I live in a quiet neighborhood in Raleigh, North Carolina. In a house Aiden helped me renovate during his final year of life. Every wall still carries a piece of him, from the pencil marks where he measured shelves to the dent he accidentally made while installing cabinets, laughing so hard he could barely stand. After his death, I spent the next several years in courtrooms instead of my own kitchen, fighting hospitals, insurance companies, and legal teams determined to silence the truth. When the jury finally ruled in my favor and the $92 million settlement was announced, I didn't celebrate. I cried. It felt like a verdict for every mother who had ever been told to stay quiet and accept loss. My plan was simple and deeply personal. I would use the entire settlement to build the Aiden Hale Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to medical safety reform and scholarships for future doctors committed to ethical care. I was ready to honor my son's name in the way he deserved. I believed peace had finally arrived, but peace did not come. It was interrupted. The morning after the settlement, a black luxury car pulled into my driveway. A woman stepped out, poised, sharply dressed, every movement rehearsed. She introduced herself as Vanessa Clark Hale, the wife of my ex-husband, Gregory. I had not seen or heard from either of them in 2 decades. She sat across from me at my dining table and slid legal papers toward me. Her voice was calm, almost casual, when she said, "Gregory is Aiden's legal father. Under marital property law, half of this settlement rightfully belongs to us. I expect full cooperation." In that moment, the air seemed to harden around me. She was speaking about my son, the son she never met, never loved, never cared for, as if he were a financial asset. She had no tears in her eyes, no memory in her heart, only entitlement in her voice. What she did not know was this: Gregory Hale signed away all parental rights 20 years ago. In the eyes of the law, he was not Aiden's father. In the eyes of my son, he was a stranger. Before I reveal what happened next, please make sure you subscribe to this channel and comment where you're watching from. Stories like this matter because real lives are affected by greed, injustice, and the strength of a parent's love. Vanessa leaned back in her chair with the confidence of someone who believed the battle had already been won before it even began. She placed a fountain pen on top of the legal packet and said, "I know this is emotional for you, Marina, but the law is very clear. Gregory is Aiden's father, and as his wife, I am now entitled to step into his position. We will take half of the settlement, $43 million, and we expect full transparency of funds." Her tone was smooth, controlled, almost rehearsed, as if she had been waiting years for this moment. My hands tightened around the edge of the table, but my voice was steady when I replied, "You said father. Gregory hasn't been a father for 20 years. He chose to walk away from Aiden's life, her lips curved with a practiced smile. Emotionally? Perhaps. But the law doesn't measure emotion. It measures legal status. Gregory was his biological father, and that gives us rights you do not want to challenge in court. I could feel my pulse rising, not from fear, but from outrage. She was using my son's tragedy as a financial opportunity, I told her calmly. Aiden never considered Gregory his father. He didn't even call him by that name. Vanessa's expression hardened. That doesn't matter. What matters is the settlement was issued after his death, and under community property law, it belongs to the surviving spouse of his legal parent. She stood up, gathering her papers. You have 7 days to comply, or we will file an emergency motion to seize half the assets. When she walked out of my house, she left behind a silence so heavy it felt like a physical force pressing against my chest. I stared at the legal papers, each line filled with calculated language meant to strip my son's legacy away in the name of entitlement. I refused to let my grief be turned into someone else's gain. I called my sister Ruth and told her everything. She arrived within minutes, slamming the front door behind her. This is theft, she said, pacing across the living room. She's preying on you because she thinks you're alone. Ruth had always been the fierce one, the kind of woman who would walk through a storm to protect family. She reminded me that Aiden had legally removed Gregory as his father long ago when he was a teenager. We dug through my safe and pulled out the documents, signed affidavits, court orders, and the official termination of parental rights. Gregory had willingly surrendered all legal responsibilities toward Aiden in exchange for never paying child support again. He did not just abandon us emotionally, he had signed his rights away permanently. That night, I could not sleep. I walked through the house, past the photos of Aiden smiling on his graduation day, the framed article celebrating his first medical patent, the last birthday card he ever wrote me. I stopped in front of his portrait in the hallway and placed my hand over his heart. I will not let them rewrite your life, I whispered. The next morning, I met with my attorney, who reacted with disbelief at Vanessa's attempt. She is basing her entire claim on the assumption that Gregory still had parental rights, he said. But this, he held up the termination document, destroys her case completely. Yet he warned me, this won't stop her. People like Vanessa don't back down when the law tells them no. They find new angles. She will try to claim emotional connection, next of kin inheritance, or spousal rights. We must be ready. As if confirming his warning, Vanessa filed her first legal motion the very next day, demanding control over the estate. In her filing, she claimed Gregory had reconciled with Aiden in his final months, and that she had acted as a mother figure to him. The sheer audacity of that lie made my blood run cold. Daniel Ortiz, Aiden's closest friend since college, came to see me after hearing about the filing. He placed a USB drive on my coffee table and said, Aiden made a video for you. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I was to give it to you only if someone tried to take what was yours. I felt a tremor go through my entire body as I picked up the drive. Daniel looked me in the eye. He knew they might come. He planned for it. At that moment, I realized the conflict wasn't just between me and Vanessa. It was a continuation of a battle my son had anticipated. This was not about winning money. This was about defending his last wish, his final voice, and his legacy of justice. I took a deep breath and said aloud, then let them come. They are not fighting a grieving mother. They are fighting my son's truth. And from that moment on, I was no longer afraid. The moment I plugged in the USB Daniel had given me, the room fell entirely silent. It was as though even the air understood the weight of what was coming. Aiden's face filled the screen, alive again before my eyes, not in memory, but in truth. His eyes were steady, his voice calm but resolute. He said, Mom, if you are seeing this, it means I am gone. And if anyone tries to claim what was left in my name, especially if it is Gregory or anyone connected to him, please know that I did everything legally necessary to protect you. You raised me. You fought for me. Any financial award given is not an inheritance. It is justice. It belongs to you until you decide how it will serve your purpose and my legacy." My hands trembled, but not from weakness. This was strength being restored. Aiden continued, "I also left instructions with my attorney. There are sealed documents that show the real reason Gregory reappeared in my life. He did not come to make peace. He came to ask me for money. He told me his new wife, Vanessa, had debts and needed help. I refused. I made it clear, legally and in writing, that neither of them was to receive anything upon my death." He ended the video by saying, "I trust you, Mom. Finish what I started." That message wasn't just a recording. It was my son standing between me and the people trying to profit from his death. It was proof of his intent, his clarity, his love. The next day, I went with my attorney to retrieve the sealed documents from Aiden's estate lawyer. Inside the envelope were hospital records, handwritten notes dated months before his death, and documents showing that Aiden had legally designated the Aiden Foundation as the sole beneficiary of the malpractice settlement, not as inheritance, but as compensation for wrongful death to be used for public benefit. This changed everything. It was not part of his estate. It was part of a legal trust. That meant no biological or marital claim could override it. It was legally untouchable. The law was on my side, and now I had my son's own testimony to prove it. Meanwhile, Vanessa was getting bolder. She began showing up in public, speaking to reporters, claiming she was acting in honor of her husband's son, telling anyone who would listen that I was a bitter woman trying to keep wealth for myself. Her plan was clear: shape public opinion, pressure the courts, and make herself look like the victim. But what Vanessa didn't know was that Aiden had not only removed Gregory legally, he had documented every attempt Gregory made to extort him. One file in the envelope was a recorded conversation between Aiden and his father, in which Gregory admitted he had no parental rights and asked Aiden to find a way to send money secretly without his wife knowing. That audio was time-stamped and notarized. It was irrefutable. That night, I sat in the quiet of my living room, surrounded by documents that proved the truth. Grief had once made me weak, but truth made me unbreakable. I was done reacting. I was ready to act. I looked at my sister Ruth and said, "We are not on the defensive anymore. We are going to end this." Ruth nodded with fiery determination. She helped me organize the evidence into binders. One for Aiden's legal beneficiary designation, one for parental termination, one for Gregory's admitted financial intent, and one containing Aiden's video testimony. As I closed the final binder, I felt Aiden's presence with me, not in haunting sorrow, but in steady strength. The turning point was not a dramatic moment in court or a confrontation with Vanessa. It happened in that quiet living room, with binders on the table and my son's voice still echoing in my heart. That was the moment I let go of fear. They weren't just challenging me, they were challenging my son's final will, and I would not allow anyone, alive or dead, to silence him. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse with my head high and my son's name on my lips. The judge would not just hear my voice, he would hear Aiden's. And for the first time since his death, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: power. Not the kind that controls others, but the kind that rises when truth stands firm against greed. I was about to deliver the evidence that would not only stop Vanessa, but expose her for exactly what she was. And I was no longer fighting as a grieving mother. I was fighting as the guardian of a legacy that could not be bought, threatened, or stolen. The courtroom was full, every seat taken, a silent tension hanging over the room like the air before a thunderstorm. Vanessa entered draped in a white suit, wearing pearls, and an expression of calm entitlement, as if she believed the judge would simply hand her a piece of paper confirming her victory. She had even brought local reporters to witness what she clearly thought would be her moment of triumph. I sat quietly beside my attorney, hands folded, calm as a still lake. There was no anger left in me, only certainty. The judge opened the session, and Vanessa's attorney immediately stood and began his argument. He claimed that because Gregory Hale was Aiden's biological father and legally married to Vanessa at the time of his death, Vanessa had inherited Gregory's standing as next of kin. He insisted that I, the mother, had no sole rights to the settlement because it was marital property under Gregory's name. Vanessa sat tall, looking at me with a smile that said, "You can't win." When it was our turn, my attorney stood slowly and approached the bench with a folder that held every truth Vanessa hoped would stay buried. He began, "Your Honor, before we discuss property rights, we must establish one critical fact. Gregory Hale was not, under law, the father of Aiden Hale." A ripple of shock moved through the courtroom. Vanessa shook her head, whispering to her attorney, clearly confused. My attorney placed a certified document on the judge's desk. "This is the parental rights termination order filed 20 years ago. Gregory Hale willingly surrendered all rights and responsibilities to Aiden, including inheritance, decision-making authority, and future claims." The judge read the document carefully, then looked toward Vanessa with a raised eyebrow. Her face paled, but my attorney was not finished. He presented a second document, the audio recording. The courtroom speakers clicked on, and Gregory's voice filled the room. "Aiden, you know I have no claim over you. Legally, you aren't my son anymore, but Vanessa needs money. Can you help us under the table?" The recording cut off, leaving a stunned silence. Vanessa's face twisted with disbelief. She stood and shouted, "That's not real! That's taken out of context!" The judge ordered her to sit. My attorney then said, "Furthermore, the settlement is not part of Aiden's personal estate. It is a wrongful death malpractice award structured under a legal trust with a designated beneficiary chosen by Aiden before his passing." He placed another folder on the bench. This document, sealed by the court, names the sole trustee and administrator, Marina Hale. Vanessa looked toward us with eyes wide and frantic, as though reality was finally slipping from her grasp, but the final blow had not yet been delivered. My attorney turned to the judge. "With the court's permission, we will now play a final recorded statement from the deceased." The judge nodded. The lights dimmed slightly, and Aiden appeared on the courtroom screen. He was in a hospital bed, wearing a patient gown, speaking clearly into the camera. "If anything happens to me, I want it known that my settlement is not my inheritance. It is justice for my wrongful death. It belongs to my mother, who fought for my life, who stood by me when others walked away. No one, not my father, not any spouse of his, has a right to these funds. My mother is the only person I trust to use this money in my name and for the benefit of others. That is my legal and final instruction." The room fell into utter stillness. It was not just legal proof. It was his voice, unbreakable, undeniable, final. The judge leaned back in his chair with a deep exhale. Vanessa buried her face in her hands. Her attorney's shoulders slumped in defeat. The judge's ruling was swift and absolute. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that the claimant has no legal standing. Gregory Hale relinquished his parental rights 2 decades ago. The settlement is not an inheritable asset, but a legal trust designated solely to the deceased's mother. The court rejects the petition in full and orders Vanessa Clark Hale to cease and desist from further claims. Additionally, due to the attempt to unlawfully seize funds through misrepresentation, this court will be forwarding a report to the Attorney General for potential investigation. As the gavel struck, a wave of relief washed over me, not because I had one, but because my son had been heard. His truth was louder than greed. His love was stronger than manipulation. Vanessa rose slowly, her once flawless composure shattered, eyes filled with disbelief as she whispered, "This isn't over." I stood, met her gaze, and said softly, "For you, maybe, but for my son, this ends today." She turned and walked out of the courtroom in silence. The cameras that once followed her now turned away. In that moment, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. My son's legacy was finally secure, not in the hands of those who saw him as a source of wealth, but where it always belonged, in the heart that raised him, the hands that fought for him, and the foundation that would carry his name into the future. When the courtroom doors finally closed behind me, I didn't walk out as a woman who won $92 million. I walked out as a mother who had fulfilled her son's final wish. The sky outside was clear, and for the first time in years, I felt as if the weight I had carried, the grief, the guilt, the endless exhaustion of fighting, had finally lifted. The settlement that others saw as money was never a gift. It was a verdict, a declaration that my son's life mattered and that his death would bring healing to others. As I stepped down the courthouse stairs, reporters swarmed, shouting questions, trying to pull me into a spectacle, but I didn't speak. There was nothing to argue, nothing to defend. The truth had already spoken for me. Ruth met me at the bottom of the stairs and took my hand. "It's over," she whispered. I looked back at the courthouse and said softly, "No, it's beginning." That evening, I drove to the foundation building that was under construction, the Aiden Hale Foundation. What had once been a blueprint was now nearly complete, a modern center with open, light-filled rooms, classrooms for medical students, a research division dedicated to stopping preventable deaths, and a fund that would fully sponsor students committed to ethical medicine. Standing in the lobby, surrounded by walls that would soon carry stories of lives saved, I felt my son's presence. Not in sadness, but in pride. In the following weeks, people from across the country began sending letters. Parents who had lost children to medical negligence. Doctors who had stayed silent out of fear and now found courage to speak up. Medical students who said Aiden's story inspired them to choose compassion over profit. One letter, handwritten in blue ink, said, "Your son didn't die in vain. Because of him, I found my purpose." I placed it on my desk beneath a framed photo of Aiden smiling in his graduation cap. Every tear I had shed, every night I had spent awake in despair, every courtroom I walked into alone, it had all led here to transformation, to clarity, to legacy. As for Vanessa, she disappeared from public view. The Attorney General launched a formal investigation into her financial activities, and though I did not wish her harm, I felt no sympathy for the consequences she now faced. She hadn't just tried to steal money, she tried to steal my son's legacy, his voice, his final message. But Aiden's voice was stronger than any claim she could file. In the end, greed will always crumble in the face of truth, and truth will always stand when everything else falls. On the day of the foundation's opening, I stood at the podium with Daniel by my side and a large portrait of Aiden displayed behind us. I took a deep breath as guests and members of the medical community filled the room. I began my speech not with sorrow, but with strength. "This foundation is not built on money," I said, my voice steady. "It is built on a promise that no patient will be ignored, no mother will be dismissed, and no life will be reduced to a statistic. This is not an ending. This is my son's beginning." When I finished, there was a moment of silence, then applause that echoed with emotion, not celebration. Daniel placed a white rose at the base of Aiden's portrait, and I knew in that moment my son's story had finally reached its purpose. His life would now save countless others. That night, I returned home and sat in the quiet of my living room. There were no more legal papers on the table, no threats, no uncertainty. I opened Aiden's journal, the one he kept during his final year, and found these words written in his careful handwriting. "True justice is not when we punish the guilty. True justice is when we protect the innocent." I closed the journal and held it to my heart. Tears filled my eyes, not from grief, but gratitude. My son had left this world, but his purpose had not. It was alive. It was growing. It was unstoppable. As I looked into the camera to record the final message for this video, I spoke directly from my soul. If you are watching this, remember, your pain can be turned into purpose. Your loss can light the way for someone else. Justice is not about revenge. It is about love refusing to be silenced. My son's life did not end in that hospital room. It lives here, in every life that will be saved, because one mother refused to stop fighting. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that a mother's love is stronger than greed and injustice, please subscribe to this channel and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps these stories reach the world and bring justice to those who need it most.